For this part, we're going to show you how to use a single hashboard for your miner if you're just going to get a housing for it and run a single hashboard, or two, but most of the housings available are for a single hashboard, and that saves you some money, and you can still push that hashboard up to. The S19 vanilla will do about 28 to 30 terahashes at 1,000 watts, which is still quite a bit better than an S9. First step, we're going to disconnect our power supply from the S19. All right. Power supply disconnected, set aside. Now we're going to tear apart this miner. So we'll start by taking the fans off the top. And we're going to take the whole fan bracket off. That way both fans come off all as one unit. So it's the outer screws. And we lift it off, and there's our hashboards. So we can disconnect those fans from the fan headers, set that aside, and we have our hashboards. Now we have to disconnect the hashboard ribbon. We'll do all three. And the whole control board comes out at that point. We're gonna undo all the hashboard screws. And once you take off the hashboard screw, you don't have to take them all off at the same time. If you want to just pull one board out, you can slide the board out and grab it with both hands. And there's your S19 vanilla hashboard. Now, before you use it on another miner, it's a good idea to clean it. As you can see, this one's got a little buildup on the end of the fins where your air is supposed to be running through. So it's good to have a clean hashboard to start with. So now that we have our single hashboard, we're going to take the whole miner and set it out of frame. So we'll disconnect the other two fans from the control board, set the miner housing aside, and now we have our single hashboard. So to connect our single hashboard, we will do our control board last. We're going to connect our power supply, and now here's where you don't have any markings on here, positive or negative, but we just know from the straps on the miner that this is the positive and this is the negative because it's written on the large power straps. We grab our two screws. So apparently 2-gauge wire is too stiff to connect. Perhaps if you got 10 inches or 12 inches of wire, you would have enough to route it. But with the 6 inches that I have here, it's just not quite enough flexibility. So I'm going to use the voltage bars that connect the hashboards together to connect our power supply here. But I would probably recommend getting the 4-gauge wire for this and a little bit extra length, or using the stock power wires and stripping them and putting on clips like the DIY from Zach. So I'm going to reconnect this bus bar. Okay, we are good with that. Make sure they're nice and tight. And make sure that they are not touching. I'm going to put a little electrical tape just around the top So if I bump it, I won't risk contact. And we'll lay our power supply down. And connect the power leads to the bus bar. Once again, the farther one away from you is the positive. And the closer one is the negative. Also keep in mind there's a lot of amps coming through these lines. Even though it's only running at 12 volts, it should be 80 to 90 amps or more, 100 amps. So it can be serious if you get a short. Stuff is going to go up in flames pretty fast and start melting. So we are connected here. I would not recommend doing it this way. Use the 4-gauge wire so it's flexible enough to connect directly to the hashboard. You would be ready to put this in your housing. I will list, there's at least 3 different plebs that make housings for these, and different styles. You can use anything from stock fans that come with the Miner in a single board housing, or there's another company that makes housing that comes with a big 8-inch fan, so it'll be a little quieter. To finish this off, we have our our control board. It's already got the Loki kit on it. It's already got the wiring to power up the Loki. We're only going to need 1 hashboard data cable, so we'll disconnect 2 of them, and we plug in power. And we plug in the hashboard. And there we are. This is a functioning single board S9 miner minus power, Ethernet, and a housing to cool off this hashboard. The last thing I'm going to show here is, instead of modifying an S9 power supply to run with 2 custom cables that you buy, the DIY actually covers modifying the S9 power cables themselves and using these S9 power cables. And they're nice and long and flexible, so that's another option. This is a kit linked in the bottom, and you have these copper lugs. So this is slightly time consuming, but we will cut off each end. Cut off each end except the one single by itself. That one will be used to power the control board. Now we take each individual one, strip it back, and we're going to put all the yellow ones together. And how many bundles? Let's see. We'll do two separate yellow ones and 2 separate black ones for the 4 lugs on the power supply. We'll be going to the lugs on the Miner. We're going to twist them all together. I highly recommend getting the 4-gauge wire with pre-terminated ends because this is a pain in the butt. But it'll save you a few bucks. Not much really, because you still have to buy this kit, and the 4-gauge wire is only $8 or $10 shipped. I clipped it to make all the ends the same, and that's about as much as will fit in here. So we should put in a heat shrink. I should have done that first. Make sure they're all coming through to the end and crimp it down. Make sure it's nice and tight. So none of them are going to come off, and you want good contact because you're going to be pushing 80 amps. 100 amps through this. Slide your shrink wrap down over it, and then we will heat the shrink wrap with a lighter, and there is one finished. So repeat this process for all the wires. We want to end up with 2 lugs for the positive and 2 lugs for the negative. And once you're all finished with that, you should have 4 nicely heat shrinked connectors. Now I've got my lugs attached and shrink wrap going on. Just take a lighter and hit the shrink wrap with it to make everything nice and tight and safe from electrical short. Get the last one shrink wrapped. And all finished. So it's a little more time consuming, a lot more time consuming, and kind of a pain in the butt, and it doesn't save you much money to do it this way. So I would highly recommend just purchasing 4-gauge wire with like at least 8 to 10 inches of length, so you have some flexibility from connecting your power supply to your hashboards. But here is the DIY solution, and it works decently well. It's just a pain in the butt. So then I would just connect the 2 negative leads together and the 2 positive leads, put a screw through there and connect it to my hashboard, and there you go.